Howdy once again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher. And today I'm starting a two-part video, and they'll be rather long parts, both of them. And the subject, something you can't use, but I'm going to use it, and I've talked about it in another video, which I'll show you in a minute. But what this is, it's a indicator mount for a boring head. This is a Criterion boring head that allows you to set it very accurately with the indicator mounted on it. Now, it's kind of a difficult project. I've had many false starts on it. I'll go through that here in a minute, but I think you'll find a lot of the machining operations that I do to be interested, even though you're not going to make this and probably have no use for it even if you were given one. So let's get started. Okay, here's the video that I made some time ago, and this was a commercial product, the Bore set. I'm going to call mine the BORE-RITE, but in some way there's a similarity, and matter of fact, this is what inspired me to make this, because this Bore set is no longer available. I'll show you the patent drawings real briefly here, and then also I'll show them at the end of the video. And this is a title of another video of mine. Notice there's no tips numbers on here, so this is a pretty old one, and there's actually several parts, but it shows how to bore using a Criterion boring head on the Bridgeport, of course. But then again, I'm going to show some of that in today's video. This is a very brief clip from that video showing you what the genuine bore set looks like. It's a great tool, not available anymore, but highly complex. That is, there's a lot of parts to it, and I'm trying to make mine much simpler. Well, there are no blueprints for this, and again, this is how I work, and I've been working on this for months, and several times I laid it aside and I said, this is stupid, this is foolish, I want nothing to do with this. I got discouraged, you know, I have a lot of quit in me. But generally how I start is with CAD, that's cardboard aided drafting, and I just work up a simple shape. And, you know, that was number one, and of course that's no good anymore. So number two, I used a piece of maple. And also to get the concept and just a general idea of dimensions. That's number two. Then I refined it a little bit using Baltic birch, and that's how I wanted it to look, or something like that. Then I went a step further, and this is PVC or something, I forgot what. And this I do rather like, and I thought, well, I'll make the final one out of PVC, but it's way too flexible. There's just no rigidity there at all, and I did not like the idea of two pieces. You see, this piece is glued on there, and that didn't hold, so then I put some screws, making it too complicated again. That's number four. So number five is cut out of aluminum, and it's very similar to this, but again, I had to fasten this piece, you can see it's two separate pieces there, with two screws, and it's just awkward and difficult to make. And I didn't like it, but it did serve. These all served a purpose. That's how I think. Well, here's the final one. This is the prototype, so I'll be making this. Let me take it off here real quickly, and I'm going to take the indicator out. This holds it. Any standard indicator, Starrett, Mitutoyo, or one from Communist China, they would all work probably equally well. But this is the final one. Actually, this is a usable one. Notice that there is a little pin here that is spring-loaded, and that pin goes into this hole. And then the bottom hole here, of course, is for the indicator with a thumb screw, knurled knob actually. Same thing here, a knurled knob to hold it onto the criterion boring head. Let me stop and show you something else. I keep talking about criterion boring heads. Criterion, I consider the major brand. Maybe I'm wrong, but they make many different styles. So here's a couple square ones. Obviously, it isn't going to work with these square ones. Furthermore, I don't know if all of these are the same. Let's take a look at the model number here. That's a DBL-202 criterion. And the diameter right here is most critical. So if you were to make one of these, you would have to make it whatever size your boring head is. This is 1.954 inches. So what is the purpose of this blame thing? Well, we can adjust our boring heads with the little micrometer dial here, but it's very small in diameter, relatively hard to read and see, and of course you got to deal with backlash if you do back it up, and it is pretty darn accurate. But what I'm going to show you is even more accurate, because sometimes you're boring a hole for, let's say, a bearing, and there just is no room there for error. You either got it or you don't have it. So this helps you get that exact dimension, I believe, and this will all be demonstrated here in due time. Now there are other ways of doing it too, just with the indicator held in a no-go holder or something like that, and I will show you that. Remember that your boring bar flexes like crazy, you know, like a piece of bamboo, like a fishing pole. So you lose a lot of accuracy by that. Even though you use a short, stubby, stout, stiff one, is still going to flex. So as you get down to your final dimension, you need to take lighter and lighter cuts and several cuts without increasing the depth of cut as you approach the final dimension. These are all basics that are critical in using a boring head. I know there's people out there saying, when will this guy shut up? But you need this background talk or none of this makes any sense. And some of you like it, some of you hate it, but you know, you just gotta leave if you can't take all the talking, because their explanations are necessary. All right, this one was made out of a piece of cast half-inch aluminum that I had. This is not roll stock, this is cast. Now, I like working with cast, so I decided I'm going to go ahead and make a pattern. And I made this pattern a month ago or more. And finally the weather broke so that I could get out in the foundry and make these castings. But I'm going to work from a casting. So there it is, made of, again, Baltic birch, one of my favorite products. Well, what is this stub, you ask? Again, that's a handle. I like to put a handle on my project, so I got some way to hold on to the darn thing. For instance, this, which is coming up in another video, this is a knob. This stem here, again, is a handle, so it can be held on the lathe or in the vise while I work on it. So, you know, that's my MO. Well, here's some castings. I made several while I was at it, because now the weather's cold again today. I can't get out there. Cold for me. I mean, it's 45 degrees. That, to me, it might as well be 10 below. But there's the casting, turned out pretty good. With some of those handles there, never mind those. Well, here's one I made. I don't really like this one because the way I gated it, well, I'd have to machine this off or, you know, just spend more time on that. So this one you can see is, I'll just saw these gates off real quickly here off camera, and then this one is ready to go. Now notice that I already got a center hole there. To me, little details like that are really important. Notice the leather fillets that I used and how nicely they make the final casting look and prevent shrinkage in those tight corners. And if I screw one up, see, I got a spare. Of course, that's never actually happened. Well, I wish I would have done, again, there's this you know, the little center hole there that shows up in the final casting, but I wish I would have you know, I spent a good part of my life wishing, like Walt Disney, some other scribe lines in here that would show up and it would facilitate my manufacture of this later on. Well, all right, I'll be back in a minute as soon as I saw this off. You know, I forgot to ask you, is everybody happy? Well, you might ask, well, I cleaned this up, see? And I re-center punch the middle. And just for the sake of interested people, you can see that the diameter here is what, 2 3/4, and this is 7/8 and 1 inch high, just to give you a general idea. And it sure would have been easy if I had made a 3D printed pattern. You know, it just would have made it easier, because as simple as this looks, I spent at least 2 hours on it, because you got to wait for glue to dry and different things like that as well. And there's drafts, there's taper on everything, so that makes it more complicated. All right, let's go over to the milling machine, and the first thing I'm going to do here is use a hole saw and drill that out to 1 3/4. Now I'm going to mount this on a piece of wood. You'll see that hardwood. Actually, it's beech wood, the same kind of wood that one of the smaller breweries, I think, claims that they use in brewing. I like beech wood. It's a neat wood. Get yourself some. Let's go to the mill. Okay, this is the patent drawing for the bore set. There's the number. I just wrote that in. Otherwise, it's really hard to find. Also, I will post this at the end of both parts of the video so you can examine it. And there's several pictures here, so I'll show you the other ones as well. And this one is shown with a digital type of indicator. Now from figure 2 here, you can see that it's a rather complicated device with a lot of little pieces, and they were stampings, and they were beautifully made. And the beauty of this, it's snapped on and off real quickly and locked in place. Probably much more convenient to use than my more primitive design. And there's figure 4 locked onto a boring head. And in the original video that I showed you before, I had borrowed that from a friend. I did not own that. There's the casting mounted on the beech wood, and I've already centered it using a wiggler and locked the table and set my Accurite to 0 in case I have to move it to change tooling. So what I'll do now is, you can see that's already set. I will spot drill it 1/4 inch. Well, why do that? You know, you got a 1/4 inch here. Well, I can't see what I'm doing when I bring that down, see? I would rather have the hole drilled in here. And I'm going to drill very deep into the wood. You'll see why later. This is a 1 3/4 hole saw made by Morse in the USA. I have to run that at slow speed. I might use the vacuum cleaner to kind of control the dust. We'll see. This is a 1 5/8 communist Chinese Forstner bit, but it works quite well. And you're saying, why are you doing this? Well, it'll become apparent a little later on. I'll go about 1 inch deep. The boring head is mounted, and I want to bore this hole now to 1.953. Remember, that's the black portion. And now perhaps you can see what this slot is for, so that it can slip over, and then the BORE-RITE can be mounted. Get on there, like that. Now I want a real good fit, because you know there's a little play there. You got to have just a little bit of play, but then it will tighten up here, because if that thing rocks later on when it's actually in use with the dial indicator on there, all is for naught. I'll take a couple trial cuts now and then measure with a telescoping gauge and determine just how much I have to take off. And it isn't a whole lot. It's less than 100 thousandths. And I'm back on high speed. And I'm boring all the way through the aluminum and down into the wood to the bottom of that big hole. And with the telescoping gauge, you can see now that I've got about 1/8 of an inch to go. So I'll rough some of that off, and I'll do most of that off camera. I've still got about 30 thousandths to go, or I guess 40 thousandths yet. This is a very good way of setting your boring head. You've seen me use it before. I've got a little Noga type. This is Chinese though. With an indicator up against, and using my Allen wrench here, I'm going to move it in 10 thousandths. I'll get a zoom in on that. But remember, when I move this in 10 thousandths, advance the boring bar 10 thousandths, it's going to take 20 thousandths off. And same thing will be true with the indicator that I'm using with this. But the indicator that I used with the original bore set was a true reading. You know, I forgot what you call it, but they're hard to find, and it would give you a direct reading, I guess is the word. Now zoomed in, I have my foot on the brake, so the spindle cannot rotate on me, because I have a little bit of mechanical advantage here using this Allen wrench. So I'll move it in 10 thousandths. Watch the dial. Now that'll take off 20 thousandths, but this is still a rough cut. But now you got to get all of this out of the way. Don't turn the machine on, or this thing will go flying. Be careful now. A boring bar can be dangerous. It can grab a rag or your finger, or, you know, wear no jewelry, wear short sleeves. Have you noticed that after I take my cut, I take 1 or 2 more cuts without increasing the feed, and there's always a little bit being taken off? That's because there is flex in the boring bar. Now I've got about 12 or 15 thousandths to go, but let's use this instead of the Noga over there. So again, it slips on like this, and I got to pull back on that until it goes into the hole. Get in there, and then snug it up, and now I can put the indicator on, zero it out. Boy, don't turn the machine on now, you'd have a catastrophe. And the beauty of this, I can point the indicator in any direction I want. I'll put it back on 0 now, and I'm going to move it in just 5 thousandths, which will take off 10 thousandths. I do not have to worry about the spindle moving a little bit now, so my foot is not on the brake. In other words, you know, that doesn't matter. Watch the, watch the dial. Now, 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 needle. And see, it wouldn't matter if I backed off a little bit and lost my place in regards to backlash, because the backlash can be taken out. All you have to do is watch the indicator. So I've moved it 5 thousandths, which means it will take off 10 thousandths. Now I'll remove this real quickly and take another cut. I won't show that, but I'm working up. I like to work up very slowly to what I consider a critical dimension, because I want this to be right on. I'm very close. And according to this, I'm at 954. So, let me show you how I'm going to double check to make sure that this will fit before I take it out. I've already loosened this up, but my foot is on the brake and I'm taking the boring head off of its shank. You know, it's threaded on there with a right hand thread. And I've already loosened it up because it was pretty tight. And it can be loosened up. I put a bar into here and held the brake, you know, and it unscrewed quite nicely. Another thing I want to show you, make sure that your gibs are fairly tight. Remember, that's the dovetail. The gibs need to be tight, and when you're doing something real critical, you can lock the middle screw here, and then you can't move or adjust the boring head at all. But now you say, why did you make that hole so deep? In the wood, that is. That is because I intended it to make my final fit like this. And I thought it might have to go down into the wood. And it doesn't quite go, but it sure feels like it wants to start. So I'm going to take another 1/2 thousandth off and see if I can get it to fit. And that's why the hole, this is the first one I made, that's why the hole is so deep, so that can go all the way down in there if need be. Okay, I took another 1/1000th off, and I think it's going to fit. Now don't let Hacksaw Melvin get a hold of one of these. And it goes in. It's pretty snug. Now you don't want to sew, I don't want to sew snug that it's a struggle, but there's a possibility that it will even open up just a little bit. So the boring is done, and remember there'll be a set screw going into the side of that. So I'm going to go ahead and take it out. Okay, got quite a good finish. I galled it just a little bit here by fitting it, and really I should have taken another 1/2 thousandth off, but it's very difficult to take just a 1/2 thousandth off because it is just a little snug. So I'm going to polish it a little bit with some emery cloth so I have just a little bit looser fit than that. Now some of you are going to ask, what kind of boring bar are you using there? And I've got a whole bunch of these. Notice that with this criterion head that there are 2 different holes in which to insert your boring bar, whereas with this particular one there's only one, and only one with this. This is really a heavy one. This is my favorite. Let's see if there's a name on this. No. It just says Chinesium, but it's pretty good, and it's carbide. A little bit loaded. I did not use any lubricant, as you noted. And I know there will be some of you that are saying, well, why didn't you make your pattern so that most of the hole was already produced? In other words, cast in, and then you can just clean it up with a boring bar. Well, that's one more step in difficulty in making a pattern. And remember, that hole would have to be tapered so it would withdraw from the sand. So to me, it was easier to remove it, you know, in one fell swoop with that hole saw, which was no big deal. You know, one neat thing about this video I just thought of, I already showed you how to use this now, so I do not have to demonstrate this one at the end, because you see the purpose and the use of it, so that'll save a little bit of time in the following video. I'm going to sign off right now, and then in the next part I'll continue with drilling all of the holes and making that little plunger and a few other little details on that. But thank you for watching, and be sure and watch the next part, and I'll see you then. This is tubalcain.